Welcome to the meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Welcome to our guests, councillors and officers. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Membership. To note that Councillor Austin will replace Councillor Sim for the rest of the year. That's a replacement. Is everyone content with that? That's fine. That's agreed. So apologies for absence.
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Jones and Councillor Carr.
Thank you. The minutes of the meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee held on the 2nd of September has been circulated and it's to be confirmed as a true record. Can I ask anyone if there's any points of accuracy they would like to raise? Or can I have a proposer that these are? Councillor Hunter and Councillor Green is second. Thank you for that. Now we move to the disclosure members' interest. Unusual in this committee for people to have an interest, but is there anything of a personal or prejudicial nature that anyone needs to declare? No? That's fine. Health and Wellbeing Board, the minutes of this meeting, which was held on the 14th of August, and the minutes of the meeting held on 11th September are attached for the scrutiny of any issues considered or agreed there. Are we happy to note those minutes? No, thank you. Now we move to the substantive item, which is the Berwick Community Hospital, with a focus on patient services. And I'm delighted to welcome Damon, Ross and Marion to the meeting. Who will update us on the Berwick Hospital. So if I could ask you, I think, Damien, you're going to start, introduce yourself and speak to the committee on the new hospital.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Damon Kent. I'm Director of Estates for Northumberland Healthcare Trust. We have got some slides. They're really just to aid the conversation and give you a bit of an update on the latest position with the Berwick Hospital development. I'll talk more about the construction and where things are at in terms of the site and progress, and Marion will talk you through elements around the service and delivery and as we move forward to mobilising the new hospital. So it feels like a little while ago since we were last here, so quite a lot has happened. As the slide says, we've come a very long way. Not forgetting the history behind all of this, of course, and I think last time we came here we talked to you about the journey we'd been on around the archaeology finds and the demolition of the part of the old infirmary. And you see there on the slide in terms of just where we were and the detail around that. So I think it was something like a 16-month period of time to do the archaeology dig. Quite a lot of extra cost in that, but an important part of uncovering this part of Berwick that hadn't previously been fully understood from a history point of view. So we have come a long way, and the building, as you'll see in a second or two on the next slide, the structure of the building is up, and I'll talk through a little bit about where we're at there. One thing I do want to acknowledge is obviously current circumstances, so it's very, very tricky. The development partner that we have, Merit, who are another northeast-based organisation, they're based down in Cramlington. They are in some financial difficulty, and you might have seen in the press that there's talk of them falling into administration. They're not yet in administration. Contractually, there's a few things we can't obviously talk about because there's a bit of process around there, but they are in that financial predicament. So we, as you would expect, we're trying to work with them to find a solution, but at the same time we have contingency plans should we need to in terms of alternative means of finishing the hospital. So it is tricky, it's difficult for the people involved, for the workforce at Merit, and there's some really, really good people in the Merit team. So, you know, first of all, our thoughts are with them. It's really a really difficult situation. They have done a great job so far in the hospital, and I say, whether it's with or without Merit, the job we have in hand is to then complete the build of the hospital in accordance with the original plans. So that said, in terms of where we are, you see there on that image, that's pretty much up to date in terms of the new hospital. So the structures, if you remember, this is an off-site constructed hospital, so it's a modular build. Most of the units here that you see, so the foundations are put in, steel frame is quite traditional, so that was done on site. And then the building is made up of a series of components, and those components are all made in a factory environment down in Cramlington. And as a lot of you will know, were shipped up, causing some disruption to the A1 and Berwick, but they're shipped up to site and assembled a little bit like a large Lego set, a Meccano set. It's that kind of construction. This construction has been used quite widely in some sectors, so particularly in residential, in hotels and student accommodation, and it came into healthcare about 5 or 6 years ago. And so we're not the first adopter of this. It's not brand new technology, but it is a way forward that central government are pushing the industry. It's about standardisation of components, and it's about speed of delivery and design, but also the fact that the components are built in a factory environment. It allows you to deal with any of the defect issues at source in the factory, rectify those, bring them to site, whereas normal construction, traditional construction, you might spend months going through defects and quality issues on site, which are quite tricky to resolve in that point. So where we are currently, the hospital's effectively built in 4 zones, and if you look at the roof line on that picture, you almost see the plant and equipment on the top of each of those 4 zones. So on the right-hand side of that, if you look to the centre of that image, that's the central atrium as you walk into the new hospital. So you'll see there's a gap, what looks like a gap then, it's a glazed roof over the top with a garden up there. The right-hand side of that image, that's effectively where the inpatient ward is on the first floor and the well-close GP surgery is on the ground floor. That part of the building is about 90% complete. So if you're inside that building, it's fully decorated, floors are in, walls are up, all the ceilings are in, it's all protected, ready. So that part of the building is largely complete. The left-hand side of the building, which is where the if you like, the more specialist parts of the hospital are, so the X-ray, the endoscopy suite, elements like that, theatre, those are further behind. That was always the plan. So it was always being completed from the right-hand side as you're looking at that image across to the left. Had this current situation with Merit not have come about, we would have been looking to open the new hospital at some point, probably spring, summer next year. Clearly, we've got a few issues we need to work through, and I appreciate one of the questions you have is around programme, and clearly at the moment that is difficult for us to predict, and it'd be foolish for me to try and throw any dates at that. What I would say is that if, as soon as we're able to resume matters, clearly we want to do this as quickly as possible. The ultimate goal is to make sure we've got the right quality hospital, properly commissioned, satisfying the original brief, and then, as I say, we'd have a phased-in programme to move in there. So, Marion, I'm sure will talk about the staff, but the staff, the team behind this, well close themselves, the GPs, the enthusiasm is like second to none. It's fantastic around there. So we've just got to get over this hurdle from the contractor point of view, get back on track. But the point for now is there are 2 elements of the external envelope that are open to the elements, if you like. So normally when you're building these things, the sooner you can seal the building, you can move everything internally. There are 2 gaps there. Now they're purposely being left to the very this stage of the programme because that's where the kit's been coming in and out. So it's quite large, the kit that gets built in the factory. So the priority in terms of the next steps, once we can regain work on the site, is to seal that part of the building. Specialist fit out is already underway. So as I left site on Friday, the X-ray room is currently being fitted out. The theatre suite is currently being developed. But as I say, the right-hand side, where the more, if you like, the more straightforward clinical areas are, they are largely completed. So we are at a position just to acknowledge that Merit did leave the site on Friday. So Friday lunchtime, we think was probably their last day on site. We don't know that for definite. We've got to work through some of that. But again, that will be noticed locally, so we need to help manage that. And Ross might say something on that on the comms side, because we've been doing a lot of comms with the community there. So we know that it's a cause of concern. We know that people are looking and wondering what's happening. The sooner we can have that result, and we're not in control of that. So again, and just to be absolutely clear, the Trust are fully up to date with all its financial obligations with Merit. I think the issues that we're seeing come out are one of Merit's own kind of control. They're not within the Trust, so there's nothing outstanding with this. But as I say, our key part is as soon as we can resurrect activity, we maintain the supply chain, all the people that are working on this, and get the momentum back where we need it to be on programme. So that's where we are currently, and as I say, if you were to go on site, that right-hand side of the hospital is largely completed with some final stages. We were literally into testing air pressures, water systems, everything's mobilised in that sense, so you get a sense of how far that is. One thing just to mention before I hand over to Marion is just when we complete the build of the hospital, and this has always been the case, we've then got another phase of work in terms of removing what is left of the old infirmary, which is at the front of that picture, doing the car park, the landscaping and other work around there. So that was always the plan, so we'll end up with a new hospital constructed, but we'll still have quite a lot of activity on the site for probably 6 or 12 months afterwards, because that's the next phase on from there. So it's important just to bear that in mind, because it's not a question of we open the hospital and everything moves off site. But there's those other phases that would take place after that. The other image just before I do hand over, so this is some of those areas on the right hand side. So you can see in that top left picture, that's protective matting on the flooring. So the flooring is down, it's fully decorated, the ceiling grid is in. The suspended tiles are not fitted in there simply because we're pressure testing and commissioning all the clinical systems, the medical gas systems that sit and run above the ceiling. But the tiles are there, they're in the next door room, they literally drop in, and that end of the space is ready to go. The bottom right-hand image is part of the inpatient ward, and again, short of having the furniture in, it's essentially completed and ready to roll. So, you know, it is in the final stages of being completed. This is a disappointing and frustration in terms of the hurdle we've got currently, but these things do sadly happen. It's not unusual in construction. Ross was reminding me that the Trust had its own experience of this when it built the Health and Care Academy down at Cramlington. That was done through a developer, but the original contractor went bust partway through and they had to be substituted out. So sadly, it's not uncommon. It is a headache at the time to resolve, but it's, you know, there is precedent there and there's ways and means of overcoming that. But hopefully you get a sense of how progress has moved forward, aside from what you can physically see from the outside of the site. I'll hand over to Marion to talk about some services.
Here. Thank you. So good afternoon everybody, I'm Marion Dixon. I'm the Exec Director of Nursing, Midwifery and Allied Health Professionals. I'm also project lead for Berwick for the operationalisation of it, but I'm also a Berwick resident. So we have been looking very, very closely about what we can provide at the hospital. The existing services will continue, but what else can we provide? The main caveat is what is appropriate and what is safe. So these are the things that when we've been talking to stakeholders, to patients, to our staff and to our consultants, that's been very much in our mind. So we've been continually looking at these services and, you know, from the years and the planning that this has taken, I'm sure you'll all agree, and certainly post-COVID, that IT have played a massive part in this. And it's something that certainly IT colleagues have been very, very keen to make sure that we are absolutely up to date with all of that in the new hospital. And that helps as well with anything that we're doing with our community staff out with the hospital, anything that can be arranged for them at home, that they can use devices, etc. But then they've also got the link in with the hospital should they need it. The things that we're doing over and above the services we have at the moment, as some of you have been following this journey, is an endoscopy unit. We haven't had that for several years now, and the amount of people, for a variety of reasons, that need to have an endoscope, they are going to be able to have that done at Berwick. So we really are looking forward to that. The travel is a long time from, you know, Berwick to Wansbeck or to one of the other sites, and that will negate the need for them to do that. We won't be able to do all of the range in endoscopy because obviously we need some of the labs and the pathology, but we will absolutely do whatever we can. The other thing that we have promised, and this is again a service that we had many years ago and we haven't had for a long time, is gynecology. We've got a large over 65 population in Berwick, and you know there are a lot of people with a lot of these kind of problems. Again, very sensitive, negates the need for them to travel away down to Wansbeck. Delighted that we have a consultant appointed that will have a specific role in working in Berwick. We're just working out the job plans and things at the moment, but even although things have been delayed a bit at the moment, we're still wanting to continue to try and bring these services forward. That might mean a wee bit of rearranging our outpatients at the moment, because those of you that know, we've had to concentrate and concertina everything into a very small space. However, the staff are very, very enthusiastic about, is there anything that we could do actually now so that there's not any further delay. So the other thing was colposcopy, which is an investigation, a female investigation that we will be doing. But the other thing is we've just appointed another surgeon last week that does urogynecology, and again for people with any problems urinary-wise. And again, that's something that is on the increase over the last few years. We know that people are having larger babies. We know that there's some issues with you know, things like obesity, and this all impacts on things later in life. So we are looking at these kind of things. The other thing that we're looking at is specialist clinics, specialist nurse clinics. Doesn't always have to be a consultant. There's always a consultant in the background should that be needed, but also specialist nurse clinics. The things that we're looking at generally, audiology, and I know that it's something that is very close to people's hearts. Certainly audiology, dental, dermatology, ophthalmology, and as I said before, urology. These are things that are in the pipeline at the moment, and we just continue to work with the teams. I know that we use Newcastle hospitals for some of these services. We continue to work with them, but we will see what we can actually bring. And discussions are really quite well down the road of what we can provide there. One of the other things, if I may just say, that there's a lot of people that complain about, particularly if they have to go to Newcastle, but also Northumbria as well, about blood tests. So that is something that we're working with Newcastle on to see, is there any way that we could absolutely get that done at Berwick? And again, it might not be every single time for the patient, but even if it's some of the time, that would definitely help. We've been talking recently, and it was yesterday actually, talking from a surgical point of view now, looking to see from upper GI, colorectal, and plastics. Linked in with dermatology, plastics is very much on the increase. And again, is that something that we can provide at Berwick? It doesn't need to have a theatre base, it can have a treatment room base. And the consultants do that very successfully. So again, these are things that we are looking into. And we will continue to do so. If anybody at all has any suggestions, very, very pleased to speak about that. It just goes without saying about our staff in Berwick and the surrounding areas, and it's actually our staff, our stakeholders, but also the people of Berwick. I think they've been extremely patient with all of this, and we know that we're so near yet so far at this next bit, but as Damon says, this is a blip, and we will continue just to work towards that opening time. But we have been afforded the temporary ward at Berwick when this was all going on. I have to say it's been fantastic. And the staff have been extremely happy with it, and the patient satisfaction has been extremely positive. So that's just a picture there of our staff in that ward. And then finally, this is just the outside of it when it will be completed. So happy to take, if there's any questions anybody would like to ask, happy to take them.
Thank you very much to both of you for your presentations. Do we have any questions? Councillor Hunter.
Yes, thank you both for your presentation. And yes, I would like to thank the staff as to how they've carried on the day service as during the works. And, you know, they've carried on as if nothing's happening. One for Damien is, can we try and give an approximate timeline, even if it's, say, next spring, next summer or that? Because people in Berwick are now starting to say, is it going to actually open? You know, because they hear the rumour mills, and I think it's just, I don't want to hold to a timeline, and I appreciate the situation is difficult, but I think it's just if we can sort of keep the people going with us, I think that would help. And one for Marion, as technology moves on, can we maybe deliver more and more the cancer treatment in Berwick? Because, you know, it might not be so invasive, and I think as it goes on. Thank you.
Okay. Damon, do you want to answer
Yeah,
that
so
first
on
question?
the timeline point, I think we're very aware of that, and it's a really valid point. I think at the earliest opportunity, as soon as we're able to contractually sit down with a replacement contractor, the very first question is, let's look at programme. Obviously, what I don't want to do is throw a daft date out that I've just created myself. You know, you'll understand that. But I think we do need to manage that expectation. People have been, I think Marion just said, very, very patient. It's had a long history to this, and clearly this is another stumble on that. So the soonest we can do that, we will. But we need to have something that informs that plan. Yeah.
Marion on the
Yes,
second.
So, Isabel, all the cancer treatments, you know, they are improving and they're more sophisticated every week, really. And just to assure you that if there's anything at all that we can be doing at Berwick, we will. You know, the team are up for it, the consultants are, and I think generally they do extremely well. I know that for a wee while we weren't able to do first treatments at Berwick, and you know, that still, you know, still happens that they need to go down to the bigger sites. But more often than not, we're able to do that locally now. So we will continue to do that. Yeah, definitely.
I saw Councillor Davidson first and then...
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if there are any plans in the future for a walk-in centre or an emergency department.
So the minor injuries, and it's called an urgent treatment centre. You know, that will be part of it.
So that's going into
that's exactly you know, the same as before. We are looking at the times of that at the moment. We have had some staffing issues there, and one of my colleagues, one of the other exec directors, is doing a piece of work on that just at the moment, just to see how we can make sure that we do have staff. We have been out to advert several times actually, right. And sometimes you get people then at the last minute, you know, they withdraw, but we are working through that. But yes, there will be that. I can't give you the exact opening times yet, but that will depend on the review as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. This hospital is so close to the border. Is there any provision or service funded by the Scottish Government or Scottish councils?
Yeah, so that is a very good question, and something that I think we're all very keen on. So we have had some initial talks with colleagues over the border, because certainly, you know, it's 42 miles, I think, to Borders General, you know, from Berwick, and the road isn't great. We've got people on our doorstep in Eyemouth, Bournemouth, etc., that could easily come to us, and we would absolutely welcome that. There is the funding issue, but I certainly know that we've escalated that, you know, to very senior people who are helping us to see if we can do something a bit different going forward, definitely.
Councillor Austin.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. I think it sounds a superb project. Allowing people to have treatment without travelling for hours, I think has got to be superb. I have two questions really regarding the project. The first one is, it's typical when you're dealing with a contractor to hold some retention money back for defects. Do we have this with Merit at the moment? And secondly, will the new contractor take on dealing with remedial aspects? And the last one is detail more than anything. When it comes to car parking, are we going to have a pay-as-you-leave type model, or as a guess how long you're going to stay for and pay on entry? It's a minor issue, but you know, in our family we've been badly affected by my wife, complaining that she had to guess how long she was going to stay for, and pointlessly missing an appointment. But I'll leave that one with you.
Yeah, I think I guess I'll tackle those. So there's some good questions in there, I think. So the retention one's an easy one. Yes, there is a retention under the contract. Part of the process we'll end up getting into, if there is an administrator appointed, is being very clear with them about where exactly the project is at, and evidencing that. But the retention forms part of that dialogue. So exactly as you expect, it's a standard construction contract. Sorry, I now forgot. I remember the car park one, but what was this? So the car parking one, it is something we're reviewing because we know we need to. We've got a similar issue at our other sites in Blythe and Alnwick where, yeah, and again, you know, the space is limited, it's very tricky. So we are just currently having a conversation in execs at the trust about how best we can do that. And I think there will be something come through on that pay on exit in terms of, rather than guess the amount of time, because that doesn't feel very appropriate. But we need to just also work out the actual mechanism so the payment system is as easy as possible for people as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. Just one question. When you were commissioning the service or the hospital as a whole, presumably you've had input from people at strategic level regarding what service you need within Berwick. But when you were actually building the wards, did you take advice or input from any of the staff who've been working on the wards? If someone's been working on the ward, for instance, for 10 years, they might say, if we had another ward, I would like to see this, or that was a bad idea. Have you incorporated any of those insights?
Yes, we have. Yeah, we've been very much in touch with our staff, and obviously many years ago I was a ward manager there, and it's so important to listen to people that are actually doing the job. So we have project meetings every month that the staff are well represented in each of the areas, and that's been going on for how long now, Damon? 3 years.
It feels like, yeah.
So and we've also had a lot of sessions sort of really with the community as well. You know, we've had things in the town hall, we've had things in the community centres, we've been at the elder building, various things like that. So I think we have tried to consult as much as possible. But your question about the staff themselves, yes, they have been very much involved. And probably staff that have been there and have moved on somewhere else have also been involved, which has been good. I don't know, Ross, if you want to say anything there.
Yeah, it's probably just a good point as any to say a big thanks to all our partners and stakeholders who we've worked with on this. And I know we've got planning at the end of 2020, which seems like ages ago, but we've really appreciated the support from councillors, MPs, Health Watch, all the bodies that we've been meeting with really, really regularly throughout this, and appreciate the sort of, where as frustrated as others that it's sort of, we've got right to the end and it's dragging on a little bit. And as Marion says, we've had sort of loads of public drop-in sessions. We've been back and forth up and down to Berwick to meet a whole range of people very regularly to talk about how the project's developing and how we're going to amend it. And if anyone has any ideas about, you know, things we haven't done or things we could do more, please do let us know, because we've really tried to cover the sort of the digital bit of it with a website and videos and things, but also the really, really important regular in-person stuff that we've done. And I remember lots of cups of coffees and things in the hospital on the top floor there. And I suppose the last bit is just to say we do appreciate the frustration and thank people for the patience, but we're really committed to finishing this off and getting it over the line and delivering a really, what I hope you'll agree is a really high quality community hospital for people in Berwick as well.
Excellent questions from particularly some of our new members, and it's probably just worth mentioning the history. You mentioned about an accident and emergency, and back in 2010 there was a discussion about having another major hospital in Northumberland, and it was decided that was going to be in Cramlington. And it's a great frustration that a fight, I don't know how well I wasn't elected then, the fight was put on then, but not a major hospital, if not in Berwick, but much nearer Berwick. And the point about the cross-border is a very good one, and it's one that I've raised before, because Marion, I know you're an individual, just where you live and everything, a champion of this, but it's an iron border. They don't look, you know, when you're thinking about whole hinterland and the area that we cover. So, you know, that's a historic decision that we can't, unfortunately, change now. maybe in the future, but unfortunately it's not realistic to get a major hospital or a A&E. But on that, so when residents say, and I've got a couple of questions on this, when residents say, and say to Councillor Hunter as well, we need an accident emergency, it's kind of like, I know the past, that's not realistic, you know, don't talk about things that aren't realistic just now, or, and I'm not an expert on the, the really expensive scanning machines, that's not realistic in a community hospital. But when people say, getting the blood taken, and you think, and sometimes people ring up and they said they've offered me an appointment at 8 o'clock in Cramlington or wherever, I live in Berwick, or an elderly person, they'll say you need somebody with you, but you can't have somebody with you in patient transport, or they have to, the cost of having to go, and you think there are, when you look at it, you think there's certain things, and cataract operations, is another one where you think we should be able to get those locally, and actually, even other people travelling up to Berwick to take the pressure off the major hospitals. So on that, where are we regarding eye surgeries? You've mentioned the blood taking. Midwifery. Somebody said to me, and it could be a rumour, that it's only open 3 days a week now, and there's been no birth since January. Now that's just a rumour, so I'd put it to you to ask to clarify. Is midwifery services currently being cut?
Yeah, so, and you did email me about that, Georgina, thank you. So the midwifery services haven't been cut, but we've also been using not just the hospital, but over at the Sure Start Centre in Tweedmouth. So we use both. So it might be, and I go over regularly myself, and there isn't anybody there because they are over at the Sure Start Centre. So that hasn't changed at all. We will always see people, and it'll be antenatally, and look to see, the provision of their maternity care, and just make sure that they've got all the information that they need. And that works very well, actually, and if there's anybody at all that you feel that needs more information, then please do tell us, because I know Katie, our head of midwifery, is very, very keen to make sure that people are well looked after. There's also obviously a lot about choice, which we absolutely welcome for these mums to be. But also we have to be thinking about the delivery itself and the low risk or the high risk ladies. And that's all done as part of their assessment when they come in.
And what's being done, I know this is a complex area that's come up before, because what happens is sometimes people are sent somewhere else to get something quite basic and you think should be done, and then they said, I was sent all the way down to X, but I heard my neighbour managed to get it in Berwick, and there seems to be a communication issue sometimes. I think there's a community issue between consultants, GPs, which ends up somebody at the end of the phone or getting a letter sending them to Cramlington or Newcastle. So I do think there's a communication issue, and I do think there's sometimes an issue of the pressures of waiting lists. Now, we've talked about the sick cancer waiting times, nobody wants to wait for urgent treatment, but if it's a hearing test or something, you don't mind waiting another week to have it in Berwick, do you? Let's be honest, or locally. And I think sometimes there's a pressure on trying to take waiting list targets, not actually putting the patient at the centre of it, and much more convenience of having non-urgent, more locally.
So certainly, we can look again at the communication, and the only thing I would say there is that obviously every patient is individual, so I wouldn't be able to comment specifically unless, I could get some examples. But they are all assessed on individual needs, so it might be that, I would be able to do something at Berwick, but my neighbour wouldn't, and that would be dependent on the condition of that, patient. Regarding waiting times, we just try and make sure that our waiting times are as short as possible. And again, it's just if there's anything urgent, we absolutely try and endeavour to do that as quickly as possible. I think it goes back to I think your point about outpatients and things and what else we can do, because there is a group that looks after sort of an outpatient project group at the moment, and that has really come on in the last sort of year about outpatient appointments, and you know, if you can get it locally, then we absolutely need to try and have that done locally. And I think generally people think that if they could have their initial outpatient appointment locally, but then if they have to travel for something more sensitive or something more detailed, or their inpatient hospital experience, then that is acceptable. What people don't like is that they go for an outpatient appointment locally, then they have to go down to, say, Wansbeck or North Tyneside, and then the next week they have to go for something else, and the next week they maybe have to go for another thing. So one of the things that this group are doing is to see if we can, you know, pool everything together so it's just one visit. And you know, that might sound quite easy, but actually it's very difficult, because obviously with the job planning of all our consultants, and it may be 3 different things, it's about making sure that we can enact all of that. But these are things that we think would be absolutely beneficial to our patients, and particularly when we're talking about Berwick and the surrounding area, that it would be really pertinent for us to try and work well with this and with the teams.
Does anyone have any questions yet?
Thank you. Thank you all for that. I think my first reflection is that it is really good to hear the list of services that you're talking about, the patient services, and certainly they're the ones that came up during the engagement. So I think hopefully the people of Berwick can see the importance of engaging and having, you know, talking about what it is they feel is important. And I think it's reflected in the services that you're talking about. And I think we're also particularly pleased about some of the services that, as you say, are delivered by Newcastle hospitals. And we know in the past that has not always worked as well as it could do. So if that is now a positive thing, that's to be welcomed. I think I'll pick up on your last point about the issue around outpatients, because I think what you've just all been talking about is very much, from our perspective as Health Watch, the things we hear about how the system works for people. So anything that you can do in Berwick to make those things learnable across the rest of the system. The blood test, I think, is the really, really big one. And that you know, having to get down to the south for, but that's also from the west as well. I mean, so all of Northumberland has that issue. So I would say the learning that you're doing in Berwick, if that can then be rolled out, that would be a great relief to the people and patients of Northumberland.
Anyone got any more questions? This is the only substantive item on the agenda, so if anyone else has got anything else they want to add. So I suppose just to sum up, and I'll just first of all on the build of the new hospital, you've been really open about it, so really appreciate that. And you've said, you've been open that, and we have seen this in Berwick, haven't we, that it's, in the talk, that work has stopped. The work completion was just months away though, so we're not, when people think it's years away and it's, or even it's not going to happen, it's only months away. You would think that a solution would be a matter of a few months away, so it's not great, but just to be realistic about it, we are not too far away, let's put it there. And there's obviously a sense of contractual issues, legal issues and things that are being discussed, but the trust message is that you're doing all you can. Yeah. And meetings are going on as we speak almost, or?
No, I think you're right on the time frame is, I mean, you can look at this, you know, all this, the original planning consent, I think somebody said was 2020, so, you know, it goes back that far, and then they've had the delay with the archaeology in the start, but, you know, this, we are in the final knockings of the project, if you like. So yes, you know, you're into what I hope is months. You know, we're not talking about being, you know, 3 years away, anything like that. But the reality is, I don't want to speak on behalf of a process we haven't yet been able to put in place. So yeah, and you know, we still meet and talk with Merit on a daily basis in the hope that we can resurrect something. But the information appears to be that they will fall into some form of administration, and then we have to look at a contingency plan, which we have in place for every project in any event. So it's about mobilising that and doing something with an alternative contractor as swiftly as possible. So that'll be our next steps, assuming that happens. But at the moment, the site contractually still Merits, and it's, you know, for them to take that action and that step. They'll be working through in terms of their own financial position, their staff position, their supply chain, and all of those other complex matters. For us, the bit we need to, and I just want to be very open, because people locally will see that nothing is happening on the site this week, you know, because they left, as I said, at lunchtime on Friday, and you'll hear that, and it's only right that we share that with you, and we're not hiding anything in that sense. But we are kind of, it's not in our gift and control at the moment. That's the bit we need. Once we have that, as hopefully I've said, you know, we've got that contingency plan that'll be put in place immediately. Yeah.
And our message, very obviously, we want the hospital to be complete as soon as possible, but we also want to be that the people who've worked in the hospital get paid as well. Which we
and there's that ripple effect, isn't there? Because, as you know, we would have had, at its peak, we had about 160 people on site every day, and those people are, you know, they're spending money in the community. Some of them are staying overnight and all the rest of it, and that generates business for people in Berwick. And we'll get back to that point, albeit we're still in the relatively speaking, in the final stage of the hospital. So I think we're very aware, you know, there's a big impact on the town as a result of that. So, and that will be felt by a lot of people, won't it? So yeah, the sooner we can get back into that and say get mobilised again with what I suspect will be a replacement contractor, then the better for everybody. You know?
And then finally moving on to Marion, just first is to say the message about services is that there is no cut in services to existing. There will in fact be more, and you are personally working flat out to get even more. And if you could just sum up, and also just when would be the next opportunity? Is there another public engagement session due, or is it just contact you if anyone?
So we haven't got another public engagement set at the moment, and probably with other things going on at the moment, it probably wouldn't be right. But I'll be led by Cara and obviously comms from that point of view. But anything at all that anybody, you know, wants to ask or anything, you know, please do just let us know, because we don't know the answers to everything. But if you can give us some ideas, suggestions and things, then we absolutely, we can't promise that we can provide everything, but we can promise that we will listen and consider. And if it's safe and appropriate, I said at the beginning, then that's only going to be of benefit to everybody. And it's been a miss of me, Georgina, not to mention when we were talking about our stakeholders, but also our colleagues, that I work very closely with Neil Bradley. We meet every week just to go through things, and that's particularly about the flow of patients through our hospital and make sure that, you know, they are getting to the right place for them, whether that's home or elsewhere. And I think we're extremely lucky. We marched with 2 councils. Obviously, we work with North Tyneside Council as well, but we're talking about Northumberland here. Not everybody has that privilege, and I have to say it works extremely well, being that integrated service.
And Ros, do you want to say anything to sum up?
I think just in summary, as soon as we have any more formal news that we can share in the way that we have done on the project up until now, we'll do that again, and we've got, you know, we've got into that rhythm of doing it almost every month with our different groups of whether that's councillors or MPs or stakeholders. But fairly imminently we'll be able to share that in more depth, and then we'll have a look at where we'll go from there. But hopefully that will be sooner rather than later.
Thank you very much. That was a really good session. Really appreciate you coming to give us that update. So finally, we move on to item 7, which is the reports of the scrutiny officer. So over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. Both reports are just to note. I don't have any verbal updates at the moment. I do have a couple of suggestions from members, but just to reiterate, if anyone else has any other suggestions, please let myself know or Councillor Hill, and we'll try our best to get it on the work programme.
So when we have ideas for the work programme, sometimes it's an idea and we need a little bit of thought about how we do it. Sometimes it's very obvious and an update on something that we'll put on the list. From the floor now, does anyone have anything that Councillor Hunter?
it may already be on the programme, dentistry, which is something that we've raised quite a bit, and there seems to be more and more coming out the NHS and going private, so I think it's keeping it on the radar.
I've got dentistry down for the January meeting, so they should be coming then.
Yeah, from the Health Watch perspective, two issues that we're aware of, particularly audiology. And the committee had a representation from Newcastle Hospitals previously about their improvement plan of services in Northumberland. I think it's time to revisit that fairly soon, give them feedback, so that will be useful. And also the ambulance service and how they feel that they're working in Northumberland and what are the pressures that they're under, because obviously again we're getting feedback, so it would be good to understand it from their perspective.
Thanks, Derry. I've made a note of those, so I'll catch them up.
Does anyone else have anything at this stage? So you can email either of us in at any time if anything comes up. The sad news is we don't have any more meetings until Christmas, unless something huge happens. You never know. So the date of the next meeting is the 6th of January at 1 p.m. I haven't had any urgent business alerted to me, but has anyone got any urgent business? I will therefore close the meeting. Thank you very much for everyone's contributions and attendance.